corner there, but those lizards were here first. I guess I'll have to sit somewhere else. So the lizards moved, so I took their spot. And I just met a really friendly bunny rabbit. And some butterflies on a hike I went on today that was probably about 4 hours. So I'm a little bit tired. And I was thinking about flow as choiceless awareness when I was on the hike, because of what Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler talk about. If somebody's like falling to their death and they manage to save their life, and their reaction time and their calculation of things is faster to the point where they're able to save their life somehow. And basically they're saying it's faster than conscious choice. But what is conscious choice? It's a bunch of programs overlaid over our senses. So instead of sensing and acting, we're enacting this so-called conscious choice. And so they're studying how it's easier to get into flow in these states where the body is put under sort of extreme circumstances. And in those extreme circumstances, there's no point in choosing with those programs that we've been conditioned into seeing through. So it's a bunch of conditioning that is the thing that we think chooses. And all of that is the accumulated me programs and knowledge. So we're choosing through our knowledge. And that knowledge is overlaid over our senses. So we're not sensing things holistically and acting with our senses without thinking. And so what I'm saying is that to me it sounds like what Krishnamurti talks about with choiceless awareness. And what that means in a way is that there's no programming there doing the calculating, which is the choosing. So if there's no one there choosing, then what is choosing? Well, what is choosing when one is falling to one's death and manages without thinking, like basically the person is falling in gravity faster than thinking. So gravity, the speed of gravity and falling in gravity is faster than thinking. We can't think and decide, oh, I'm going to put my hand here and I'm going to put my hand there and I'm going to do this and that. Something else comes in. So something else is choosing, something else is moving us and animating us when we're falling at the speed that gravity induces on us. And I feel like, in a way, consciousness itself chooses, but it's not really choosing. So an ego me program might choose between A bit or B bit, whereas when there's no programming there choosing, then there's infinite bits available. And the conscious will, or the me, or the ego, is choosing between a very limited amount of bits that it's been programmed into choosing between. And so I was thinking about how, while walking down the mountain, down the switchbacks, that when we walk and we're going down a mountain, we fall. So we're not actually walking as much as falling in gravity, but we're able to control that with our legs. And in the same way, we might think we're choosing to move our legs, but we're just moving our legs and gravity is helping. So there's this sort of play between the two. There's this dance. And I feel like we also have a field of consciousness. And the programming prevents us from falling in the field of consciousness. Whereas if we were just falling in the field of consciousness, that field of consciousness, in combination with it impressing upon all of our senses holistically, would animate us, and that would allow us to act without choosing. So much of our movement anyway, we don't choose to do, but it's sort of partly gravity and partly us. So I think there's this other element, this field of consciousness, that in a way, in map consciousness, we're falling in the field of consciousness without the programs in the way. The programs are kind of the net, the parachute that allow us to sail through life and give us time to like make these decisions and things. When, you know, the parachute is a false structure. So the reason I'm saying this is because it demystifies it in a way, not just these few words about it, but to act like it's some big mystifying thing that we need to be falling out of the sky in order to go into is making it seem like it's something so unattainable. I feel like the field of consciousness it doesn't choose, that makes it sound. The field of consciousness animates us. So just like walking down a hill in the field of gravity, the field of gravity is helping to animate us. So the field of consciousness, when it interacts with our body and all of our senses, animates us. But there's this tension of our programs that constricts us and actually keeps our animation very limited and fragmented according to very few programs. It would be like being in a video game and having very few moves that one can do on the controller. It's like the difference between the original Nintendo system and Sony PlayStation, the latest one. There's just so much more that one can do. So the original controller would be like the choices, the programming that we have now. And we're being controlled by the programming as opposed to the totality of the mind and the field of consciousness and the universe. I can see this stuff so subtly and clearly. It's fascinating. It's like studying the animation of the mind. And I'm wondering if this self-dialogue about all of this is seeing all those subtle nuances of it to learn that language, and then it's like progressive training of seeing and perception, because the first experience of map consciousness is so intense. But then as one explores the subtle nuances of mapping consciousness itself, if one is seeing it that way all the time in daily life, then it's not like being blind one day and then having full vision the next. It's having that vision every day. And then it just seems normal. And again, I still haven't come off my medications or anything, but I'm hoping to do that when I get back home. I'm not sure what the language is, but I also feel like it's the language of beauty, because beauty isn't human abstractions and programs. It's not the way we've been trained to see, but it's everything else. So one way to see beyond it would be just to see when one is seeing something that is a human construct. And I wonder if words can be used in service of beauty. I think that must have been how they originally came about. A sense of awe and wonder. But now they're being used to divide up and fragment the beauty, at which point it's no longer beautiful. And perhaps we need to speak that language again in order for the human brain to allow human consciousness to fully inhabit it again in terms of the upcoming generation. And we have all these words running through our nervous system like static, like noise. And we don't have words and perception of beauty running through our nervous system. And our nervous system is designed to perceive beauty. So if we want to get back to its original function and design, then learning that language is important. I was saying to someone that if you ever see me kind of just standing there and walking in circles maybe, that I'm in a holding pattern, waiting for the next thing to catch my attention. Someone to walk up and say, hey, you want to do this or do you want to do that? It really is just like wandering with love, like that shirt that I have. And I feel like the mental health system could be a type of holding pattern for people. It's holding them in that pattern, but we can also start to transform into wandering with love. And wandering with love in a way is like allowing the field of consciousness to move us and understanding that it will catch us, just like our legs will catch us each step we take down a mountain. Because right now we don't use all our senses, we just use our me sense, which is our programming. We filter everything through the me, and we make choices based on that. Can we allow our senses to bathe in the field of consciousness and start to awaken our senses holistically and move us as the moment, just like we move with gravity? What can we gravitate towards with consciousness? What can we conscious-tate towards? So part of it is learning the language of perception. Perception, action in the field of consciousness. And partly why things can get a little bit dicey is when we're in the field of consciousness in lower levels. And a lot of times we act accordingly. We act out that level. And I feel it's important to sort of protect oneself from that, because we become more like ping pong balls than having these programs of control. We could even imagine that everything we think and imagine, if we projected it out of our eyeballs, and that energy of those images and sounds actually has force in terms of making something happen. It's an active agent. So what is the light coming out of one's eyes? Is it good images or bad images? And beyond that, what about no images? Because the image we're projecting from our eyes is the choice we're making. We're choosing to extract that information from reality, which is usually based on old information. And so not projecting any images and being choicelessly aware is a qualitative difference. And then anything is possible because our perception is clean, and consciousness itself, that energy field of consciousness, can animate us towards that which the mind would want us to create. And these images that we make are our partiality, and they make life partial, and we're re-experiencing from these old partialities. And it's actually a limiter. The light and sound we project from ourselves limits all of the information out there. And I don't know to what extent that is necessary. It seems to be necessary. I actually feel like the consciousness animating us versus choice from programs, it gestures us, it acts through us, as us, and through those actions we move towards something else than our programs, which is actually moving away from life. It's contracting away from life. It's contracting away from actually meeting the mind. And when the mind and the human beingness meet, and there's no me as this mediator, then the mind is what moves us. Consciousness. And then anything becomes possible. And I feel like, in a way, with these crisis events that seem to happen, it's like going as far along as one can on that particular path of the mind animating oneself. And then one gets to the limit and it becomes fearful. And it's a type of death in a way. I feel like one could be dying to alternate realities because one's brain is in the quantum state, and then when one goes far enough along that path, certain realities have to die, but one experiences that as something terrifying. And one might even have to experience that extreme terror in order to sort of save other people from experiencing that, because there's so much terror out there that people are not experiencing because they're using certain means to get through it. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it's not resolving those energies. And they have to be resolved some way in consciousness. I don't quite know how that works in terms of this whole mechanism of terrifyingness. I feel like we could gesture ourselves quantum. I wonder what kind of lifestyle design would facilitate being open to possibility and moving in possibility as possibility instead of moving in programs as programs. And I've already had that sensation in map consciousness. I'm just wondering why it seems to burn out. And somebody once said to me, of higher level of consciousness, don't push, let it come to you. I'm not really sure what that means, but I feel like it partly means that it doesn't take time, so it doesn't matter if I sit here in the same spot for 10 years, and then if I got up and I was moving in possibility, whatever was meant to be created could be created very quickly, or it could be created the same way if I got up and did that now. So it doesn't really matter in terms of time, and it's already here. It's a matter of really just going for it, I guess, whatever that is. And I feel I'll take some time to figure that out. Maybe I'll continue to wander after this